1994. I was in, actually 93, so I started with 93. I was in a different band, Phantom's Opera. And, you know, we were doing some gigs, lost our singer, things just weren't happening. So, I think I was in a band with Tom Miller at the time. And we started working on our own stuff. And I was recording some solo stuff, guitar, instrumental stuff. So I did that at my house, and at the same time, me and Tom were working on stuff that was similar to what the band's doing now. And yeah, that's pretty much how the band started. I did an instrumental thing. I sent it out to some guitar magazines, Guitar World, and things like that. Some good reviews. And then somehow it got into Japan, and actually a label, Zero Corporation, contacted me. And I wanted to know if I had a band similar to the solo album. So I recruited some guys and started putting stuff together, and it was pretty much the first album. I really consider the first album a demo, just because it was like all the guys were new. It's not like the band had any growth or anything. It was like everybody was just in it, and it was like, you know, we have this deal. There's you know, let's just get this done. And so I mean, I knew Miller from the previous bands, but like Pinella and Jason and Rod, I kind of knew. He was in a band with me for a couple of months only. So it was like everyone was kind of new to each other. And yeah, it just pretty much happened really fast. You know, got the phone call, wrote some songs, recorded everything at my house, which was a mistake, probably, because the sound started out pretty bad. And no, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much how it all started. You know, quick, you know, just finding guys to do it. And we did it, and that was it.
Did the Masquerade thing, didn't we, for a compilation that they were putting together to be released in Japan, and then subsequently, you know, everywhere else, of course. But we started, I think, really talking about that, well, I guess, over the summer.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
So yeah, we definitely wanted to. Hi. We definitely wanted to do the first album again, but we didn't know exactly how we were going to get it done in the amount of time that we had, you know. So it's still something that we want to do, but right now I don't see if we can get to it before we get to a new Symphony X album. I think that's probably more, you know, important at this point in time. We really wanted to try to do it this summer, but we had the Prague Power, and we were rehearsing for that, and this tour, of course, and getting ready for that. It takes us, you know, some time to get these songs together, especially, you know, the Odyssey and some numbers like that take a while. So we're hoping, I think, to get maybe to that, hopefully, you know, maybe after the release of our next record. But we've got a lot of things that we've been working on lately. You know, I mean, as far as ideas for what we kind of want to do, besides for the new project. So who knows? A couple songs from the first album might make something. You know, you don't know. You know, we're just kind of.
I don't think we'll do the whole thing.
I don't think we'll do the whole thing right now. It's just not gonna happen. Something like what we did on Masquerade, or the remake. Maybe another remake or two, along with some other things. Who knows? So
yeah, it's too much work, I think. Not that it's too much work, but like some of the songs, you know what I mean? Need like a lot extra.
And then a lot of like the stuff that was done with especially the vocal department, you know, was pretty much written. I mean, well, it was written by Mike and Pinella, and with really no reference to the singer at all. Rod kind of came in after everything was done, and he was kind of told what to do, and so it really kind of didn't have a perspective from a singer's input sort of thing. So I think we'd have to go back and really try and, at least my part, you know, especially try and figure out, you know, where I fit in, and try and rewrite some of the melodies and things like this, and be, you know, The music too. The arrangements.
Definitely some parts that.
I think it'd be cool. I think it'd be really cool. But we just
It'd be cool, but to do the whole album, I think would be too much.
might be kind of overkill.
Yeah, because like there's some songs that are pretty good enough to leave, like you said, maybe do some stuff with the vocals.
Yeah.
But there's some that like I listen to and I'm just like, oh god, what are we thinking? So yeah.
But you know, I know a lot of people like the album, you know, so.
And there's some good material on there. It's just there's some bad material on there too.
Basically, Rod Tyler told them.
Look at the camera, sir.
Tyler told the band to replace him with me. That's pretty much what happened.
Yeah.
He had some other project called Funny Thumb that he was going to do that he told the band. And so I was already in another band at the time, playing around New York City, and we were out in Los Angeles for the Foundation's Foreign Music Seminar, doing stuff like that. And then we did a benefit concert for Ray Gillen, who was a singer of a band called Badlands. That was Jakey Lee's band after he left Ozzy. And Rod Tyler was there that night, and he saw me sing, and he was talking to me. It was really weird because I was hanging out with him. He's a really cool guy. I had no idea that he'd eventually, lead me into this band, but he quit, and then there was a phone call from Tom, I think Miller, who hung out with Rod a lot at the time, and I think he came to a gig that we did. I think him and Miller did come later to a gig that we did. And then I got a phone call about 3 or 4 weeks after that saying, hey, remember us, and the Rod's leaving the band, could you come down and do it? And at first I really wasn't, jumping at the chance, to be honest with you, because I was kind of happy, with what I was doing. And listening to what Rod had done on the CD that I got, I didn't really want to do it because I didn't want to sing like that, really. I mean, not that, he's bad, no, he's all right, but, I just wasn't, I was really into blues rock, and I was into the whole alternative thing that hit the United States at the time. I really loved Cornell and Alice in Chains and all these bands. And, this is something that's totally different. But after I met the guys and I saw how musically talented they were, I saw that I had a lot of potential in the band because, it was after I played with them and did some stuff with them and sang some of the stuff my way, I realized that I could actually develop a lot of different styles in Symphony X, and then I really realized what I was doing was very limiting at the time. So that's kind of what made my decision to join. And then I guess the rest is, Symphony X history, so that's it.
The first album, we thought we could do everything ourselves, and we really couldn't. We really couldn't do it ourselves, we tried. So for the next album happened pretty quick, I think 8 months after the first album. And that was pretty much our decision. I mean, the Japanese, they were happy that we did it so fast. But it was our decision. I mean, we knew we wanted to work on our songs, the production, obviously, and Eric, Rachel, and Steve Evans, they had a studio kind of close to where we live. And I've known those guys for years and done other projects with them at their studio. So it seemed like a good idea, write the songs ourselves and then bring it to those guys to do all the recording, engineering, try to make it sound good. So that's what we did. And we had actually started the album with Rod. Halfway through the vocal sessions, it just, the stuff that we had recorded wasn't really even there. I mean, he knew it and we knew it, and he knew that he wasn't working out. That's when he's like, hey guys, I got some other stuff to do. I know this other guy is not quite as good as me, this guy Russell, maybe you give him a shot. So anyway, it just didn't work out. One day in the studio, it was like, look man, he knew it. It's like, dude, it's just didn't happen. So he's gone, and that's when you got the phone call. And would you come down for like 4 days, I think? Banged it out?
Yeah, like 4 days. I did all the vocal singing in about, really 3 sessions, but it was like
what happened?
4 days.
What happened?
What do you mean?
How come you can't do that now?
Because all this shit was written then. what the hell? I walked in, everything was done. So all I had to do was, sing it.
Yeah.
So it was pretty. Nowadays, we reverse engineer that whole process. We kind of write as we go, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, that record was interesting because that was my first time recording in a studio like that, but it was the first time I had done an album, or a full project, and kind of been entrenched in the vocal booth for 3 straight days. So that was a lot of fun. But it was cool because Evans was a big key to that because he really,
Both of those guys.
Yeah, both of them. But Evans tracked me, and he was a metal guy. He came from American Angel, was a pretty successful metal act in the United States. And he knew the type of performances that I was capable of. So he was really instrumental in really pushing me to go for things. Go for this here, try it.
Yeah, take it to everybody. They totally knew. Even like with me and Pete, the same thing,
Yeah.
Eric too. I mean, they knew.
Eric had like the subtle approach. Evans was a little more abrasive. He'd tell you that fucking sucked.
Yeah, man.
But Eric would kind of like, his thing was like, so maybe you want to try another one, or? And then when you heard that, you knew that the tape wasn't happening. So yeah, they were pretty key in getting us comfortable at really making a record. I think You know what I'm saying?
Good to work with.
Yeah.
And they knew what we were about.
Easy guys, really, as people. So that was nice.
And they knew what we were about. They knew what the music was about.
Yeah.
So there was no guessing of what we wanted. They knew. They heard the material. They knew it was like, okay, hey, they like this, they like that, we like this kind of sound, and this kind of thing. So it's with that album. It was having Evans and Eric on the team was a big part. And I think the songs too, like me and Pinella working together. On the first album we worked together a lot, but I think on the second album we really started to know each other, how we thought. We got to a point, me and him would get together and he'd just start something and I could follow along and he'd be changing. I just knew where he was going to change, so it's pretty good. Chemistry started happening.
Yeah, you definitely hear things are starting to develop then, you know what I mean? Things are starting, but it was still, I don't think, it wasn't a band yet though. It wasn't a band yet. It was still...
you were new, it was the same thing that
it was
we
the
had.
same kind of thing, but it was just a little bit, it was like the second time around with this sort of a format. But, so there's obviously a crisper presentation of the songs, there's a little more focus with the songs, but it wasn't a band yet, I would say. But it was starting to become one,
Masks. Just another thing,
light, dark.
Exactly. But not much thought getting to it. I mean, we'd gotten a call from the Japanese, and I was already working with Tom, and it was like, okay, they're interested in the music. We don't have a band, we don't have a name, we don't have anything. So it was like we got the guys, we got Pinella, Rod and Jason, trying to throw all the songs together, trying to record everything. And it's like, well, we don't have a name, we don't have anything. So the name came about just by, we were sitting around talking about what kind of style we were doing. Obviously me and Pinella, a lot of the classical stuff. So Symphony came up, and then it's like, yeah, we like some of the progressive stuff, and we knew it would be a more vocal-oriented band, not just all music. So then the X thing, someone said, and was like, yeah, it could be, the unknown variable, it could be everything else. So he was like, okay, that's cool. And then it was like, well, what are we going to do for the cover, or what kind of logo, or something. And then I think actually, I don't know, it was me and Tom just bullshitting ideas around. And he said something about the theater masks, but something just a little different, the comedy and the tragedy thing. And it was like, okay, so we went to some cheap, 5 and dime store, found these ceramic masks that were just white. And we got some paint, in my basement, whatever. I was like, yeah, that looks cool. And then we took them to the photographer. It's like, yeah, we want this for the album cover with whatever. So the first album cover artwork was like, all right, yeah, that's cool. All right, that will be our thing. Let's go with the music is dramatic. We wanted the music to be dramatic, theatrical kind of thing. So the mask was a cool way to link that all together. So for Damnation, for all the other albums, it was like, let's keep that in there.
Somewhere.
Yeah, subtly, it's in there. So every album they're in there, and I guess they'll always be in there.
I think the symbol actually became stronger, I think, as the band started to progress and really started to reflect what the philosophy of the band was. I think you picked the symbols that maybe you didn't realize how strong they would become in the band's persona, or whatever you want to call it, in the image of the band.
Light.
And darkness. But it is, though. It's comedy and it's tragedy. I mean, and I think us as people, we all reflect that too. We're funny, but we also have a very serious side to us. The music is, light and stuff, and inspirational. A lot of times it's very dark and very heavy. So yeah, it's very strange how it worked out like that. You know?
It was all meant to be.
It was written in the stars.
The cosmic
Energy. Everybody was yeah. We just came from England, so we're doing all the bad English accents there, you know. So.
Like Russ said, that is the album where it was a band. I mean, me and Pinella and Miller, we had a solid writing thing happen. We would get together like every day, at 11 in the morning, whatever. Everybody comes in with their coffee, P's at his keyboards, Tom, me at the control, at the console with our stuff. And it was just, it's hard to describe because everything just felt really good. Like we were working and we were happy with everything we were doing for that album especially. And the music, with the first two albums, there was definitely more of a classical thing, and some of the Malmsteen stuff, which at that time I really liked. And I think with Divine, some of the other stuff that we liked. I mean, the classical thing was always a strong thing between me and Pinella because it was easy. If I said, P, that Chopin, it's like, oh yeah, okay, this, and it was like, oh yeah, that's it. And that was cool. I mean, that still happens, but it was like, all right, maybe we need to explore some other places. And we all love bands like Rush and Kansas, so it was like, all right, well, maybe take a little bit more of the progressive element. Still keep some of the classical thing, maybe get a little heavier. And I think Divine, it was like we did what we wanted to do. It was like let's just see what let's just not try to write this way or not try to really write this way. Like we like all this stuff. Let's put everything in there. And yeah, I think it was really good. I mean, anything to add? Just everything's
No, not at
all right.
all.
So then
No.
there.
It was great. It was the first time it sounded like it was a band. We tried. We didn't really. Actually, we didn't try at all. It just happened.
That's what it is.
So-
Did not really try.
And plus, we had a better budget. I mean, just to be quite blunt, we had a better budget. We had afforded more time in the studio.
We bought our own
We
stuff.
bought our own gear. We had invested. We were always smart about that, I think. We've always tried to invest into the band. So we invested in better equipment, so the sounds are better. The guitar sound came out better. The drum production was better. We had more time. Without it, I don't think the album would have came out the way it did. There was a lot of things. I remember there was good energy in the studio during those sessions. There was magic and a lot of stuff, And then that was the first time that it happened. And then we kind of realized, oh, okay, here's where we're at here with this kind of material. And then it really was this jumping off point for everything else that we've done since. It really truly was the starting point of all the magic stuff, and it was a lot of fun. Oh my God, it was a lot of work. Even these guys were killing themselves writing, and they were in the back room at times when I was tracking, doing backup vocals on 16-inch. Quarter inch. 1 inch is a 1 inch. Yeah, 1 inch on 1 inch, and then we'd bring them back, and then the engineers would be up all night, bouncing the stuff down.
It was round the clock.
It was round the clock. I mean, and the engineers, Eric and Steve, were taking shifts. Steve would come in, and then he'd be tired and shot, and his ears would be gone, and then Eric would show up, and Steve would go to sleep for 8 hours and come back. I mean, we were just working like troopers.
And that's where the problem lies when it was the Twilight, the Rush thing, because we got rushed a little bit. On, not really on Divine so much. I mean, there was definitely pressure.
There was definitely pressure to get it done.
But we were all like, you know, working hard and everything was cool. But for Twilight, I think that's what really took its toll.
Yeah.
But I mean, everything on Divine, I mean, I still love all the songs. And I can just hear by listening, like, how things like on Odyssey, where it came from. You know, like the whole orchestral thing. Like Medusa has this really tiny, kind of cheesy sound.
Yeah, right.
Little orchestral thing, and it's like
over there.
Yeah, and then
That was actually the little birth of the whole
I think that's the
symphony thing. That started with the Symphony and Symphony X, kind of.
I know 5 it was more.
It was a really weird time though too. You know, I mean, the band was just getting together and we were just starting to rehearse, and we were kind of learning each other, and as we'll probably get to next, the unfortunate events with Tom Cohen, and then we had Jason and everything. It was a band, and then we were realizing that when we were starting to play together, that we were struggling to make what happened in the studio happen in the room. You know what I mean? Not that we couldn't play the material. I'm talking about a total just of how people gel together, how they work together, how they feel about each other. That's a big part of it. But the studio was great because we were isolated from that exposure to each other. But we worked in little pockets. Michael obviously has always been kind of the top of the pyramid, so to speak. So we all worked through him, through every person. I believe back then we kind of had the Holy Trinity though toward the end of the project. Where we call it the Holy Trinity. It's just like a reference, being that Michael and Pete and me. That's like the finishing version of everything. Because if they would score all the music, then they come and then they get it all together with Tom or whoever they were working with, and then they had to put a singing on it. So then us three would work together, all of the harmony parts and where the harmony should be, and just overall just polishing the production. You know what I mean? So that was the first time we had done that too. That was the first time I was in the band too. So
it was definitely
there's a lot of influence. My singing, just like
lyrics
and all things like that. So.
It was definitely a band, definitely.
It was hard. That was a hard one. Yeah, the Accolade was kind of like the first, I would say the ballad kind of thing, but first sort of anthem kind of thing that we did. And, we had this kind of rule in the band where at the time where we were trying to write about higher things. So if the music had a higher quality, we wanted to talk about higher ideals. Not like, oh baby, you left me, my dog's dying, and a lot of we thought that the music deserved better content and ideology in the lyrics. And I just drew on what I knew at the time was I was a knight for 15 years in a stunt show in America, which is a big arena that we had. I used to ride horses professionally and joust and everything. But I also had a very big interest in history. Every trip I come to Europe, I always indulge in the sights and seeing things, and try to learn even more, or actually see the places that I've read about so much. And the Templar was something I was always fascinated with. I'm actually reading the book now, another one.
Go away.
Well, anyway, the Accolade was something that I was thinking of based on the music that I was hearing these guys write. To me, it sounded like something medieval, and I had this sort of traveling kind of a thing. And I was like, okay, so pilgrimage sort of a vibe. So then I wrote the lyrics for the song just based on what I was doing at the time, which was 9. And it was interesting because I was reading a lot about how the whole Crusader mentality was, and how fully engrossed they were in their beliefs. And obviously a lot of people, you guys must obviously know that a lot of the Templars were founded here in France. So it's a very fascinating thing to me, the whole early Frankish history with Charlemagne. And I was actually originally going to do the song about the song of Roland, which was the actual original idea. But the Templar thing kind of struck me as being something I could write a little more tragedy about. There's a tragic sort of of an ending to the whole thing. So that was pretty much the inspiration for that song, and it turned out to be something we went back to later on. You know? So yeah, it's something near and dear to me. But you know, at the time, you understand when we did this album. For me, I was so into. I had no idea about anything else in the world. You know, I was quote unquote musically ignorant. When it comes, well, I wasn't green. I had a lot of years experience, you know, doing stuff in the States, but that's all I was exposed to. I had no idea that there was, you know, such a great festival circuit in Europe, that the markets here existed. In Japan, I knew about Japan because I, you know, these guys, but I had no idea about like the trends and what was happening in the music at the time. You know, I saw when I got here. And I opened the magazine covers and I see all these guys with swords in their hands and they're dressing up like knights. It was kind of weird to me because I'm like, oh my God, you know, I hope, you know, the song isn't going to be taken as some sort of cliche attempt to fit into this, you know what I mean? Because that wasn't the intention at all. I mean, I didn't realize that at all, you know, because, you know, I've never even thought about that kind of stuff and using that in performance of the band or in the songs or anything, which is because I did that shit every day. I wield the swords and ride the horses. I did it. It sucked a lot of times, man. But it was weird, you know. A lot of people here, especially, loved it, and like, you know, that's great because that's exactly what the people who love the song is the right people that I wanted them to hear it. You know what I mean? So it's perfect. It worked out really nice.
Kind of happening fast. The first album happened fast, 8 months later, second album, always writing, always together, which is good and bad. And then Divine, you know, was like a band, everything was cool. We weren't really touring or we weren't really playing because we didn't really think too much about it because we were real happy that we were actually almost making a living, doing what we want. You know, we were starting to get some recognition for what we did. And, we had albums coming out, and it seemed really cool. So it was like, oh, this is great. Maybe this is the way it is. So we were in the studio every day, or writing every day. And I think towards the end of Divine, it started to take its toll a little bit. I think everybody was, how can you say,
Spent?
not spent, but like agitated, on edge all the time. You know, it's just the vibe. Yeah, the vibe was like, you know. We were, understandably, because just of...
I think we were mishandled from the beginning by zero. I really believe that because what we learned now, if we knew it then, things would have been different, as everyone says, but it's true. We didn't have management at the time. We didn't have somebody looking out for our interests or pointing us in the directions where we needed to go. We had a record company dictating to us when we were going to do things because their whole existence is based on their product that they give to the market. And the more you can give them a product, the more money they're going to make, and the turnaround is great. But that doesn't necessarily facilitate a great career for the band. We should have been out on the road on that record, you know, on Divine. You know, we were rehearsing for it.
Yeah, we were rehearsing.
For it, and we were really, but the Japanese at the time, this particular company, who ended up actually going right down the hole there, didn't want to share us with anybody. You know, it was kind of a tragedy. You know, it took a lot of effort on our part to
good and bad things.
Good and bad things. I'm not dogging them. I'm just telling them like it is. You know what I mean?
Right.
For as many great things as they were doing for us, they were holding us back in so many other ways. You know, they should have really, because you get to Japan, you got to have a decent amount of money coming in because it is so expensive to get an American act or a European act to the country.
But we were there by that album, man. We were there.
We were kind of there by that album, so we were pressing them, but they were pressing us for another record. You know what I mean? So we were like, when does it end? You know what I mean? Like that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Where we're like, when does it end? I mean,
we put out this record and everyone's talking about it. There's such a big buzz about the band. Why?
And they're like, well, now it's time to do another one like that. And I think that is where,
yeah, that's where we're just like
I know Jason.
the mentality was just like, we all grew up with bands like, you know, in the 70s and 80s that, you know, an album came out by a band that was really, it was good, and they were out on the road, they were pushing the record, you know, we were like, we don't understand this when we're making records like pancakes, you know, and that's just not the way
Pancakes.
yeah, here's another one, you know. I don't know.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, man.
You know, crepe Suzette, that was that. Here's a crepe, here's another one. So, and this kind of stuff, you just can't do that. You know, this isn't like AC/DC 3-bar blues, you know. But, and not that that's bad, because that's great too.
That's good stuff.
But that thing just blew us apart, man. And it was really detrimental to the morale that we felt like, then, you know what really started, dude? It was when people were starting to write into us saying,
You can't play live.
can't play live, you're not a real act, you're not a real band. And that really started to fester, I think, a lot of tensions that were kind of there already, but we didn't know that between certain members of the band. So, I mean, whatever you want to go on with the Miller, tell them what happened.
I mean, I think some people were affected more by it, you know. I mean, you know, it bothered me, but I'm like, you know, it's like, you know, I knew that we would play, you know, hopefully everything, all the shit would get straightened out. You know, but some people just were like really on edge. Like Tom, I know Jay. I mean, I think Jay was just getting burnt out, because we were always writing, always recording, and you know, some people just take it different. So he, you know, he just said, guys, you know, look, I just need a break. You know, this is just too hectic. And him and Tom were having conflicts sometimes, you know, and everybody was just kind of on edge. You know, everybody was just kind of not in a good mood.
You know what thing too? It's like, because we weren't playing, you gotta understand, we had no market in the States. Nobody knew about us, nobody cared to know about us. There was no interest in this music then at all. So here we are, like a fruit sitting out in the sun too long, because we were just ripe as hell, but we were going bad because there was nothing to do. We were just sitting around now. The album's done, we're rehearsing, nowhere to play, nowhere to get it out there, nothing to do. So like all of a sudden, you know, it just rots. You know what I mean?
And then the Japanese call, and they're like, okay, time for another album, or whoever it was at that point. It might have been just everybody, you know. Because, and then Jay, you know, Jay was like, look, I need a break. You know, I just got to get away. I don't know, you know, what to do. And then, you know, Tom was starting to drift out too. He was starting to get a little wacky. And so, I mean, that definitely took effect on everybody. You know, just the constant writing and trying to always do a good album too. It's not like, it's like, oh yeah, you know, let's just throw together some shit and put it out. It's like, nah, we bust our ass to write good stuff. So just that pressure and the stress and not playing and then getting the phone calls, it's like, oh, the last album did great, let's get another one, you know, better than this, you know. And so I think Jay ended up, you know, leaving for a little bit. We found Tom Walling for the Twilight album. And you know, Tom was good, and it was just like, again, it wasn't like a band really, because it was almost like starting over with different guys.
Yeah, that was tough.
And we had some good songs. I mean, there's some really good material on there, but it was just another thing. It was like, look, we have a release date by such and such a time. You guys, you really got to get it done. And you know, we have a new drummer, so we're trying to break him in. We're trying to write songs. We're trying to get all this shit squared away. And it was really tough. That album was really tough, just morale-wise and just everything.
But, you know, Tom was good though.
Yeah, he was good.
He was really good. I liked his drumming. Very solid guy. I mean, personality just didn't kind of fit in with our little bunch of
our wackiness.
You know, I thought a lot of people come into this band thinking that, you know,
even people that come in this band is like, what the fuck?
Yeah, they think they're expecting like to sit, you know.
Like LaPalm.
Yeah. He goes like, I thought you guys were gonna be a bunch
like
of
old
geeks,
dorks. You know, all you guys are all serious.
You know, they come and meet us, or they get in the band. They think that it's gonna be every day is gonna be like an MIT, or they're gonna be, you know, some, you know, we're all music professors and all sort of shit, you know. But
that ain't like
that ain't like that at all. You know, we're a band like you know, a lot of bands. You gotta have your fun, and we definitely have our fun. But, you know, I mean...
But that album wasn't fun.
Yeah, that was fun.
All the stuff that went on. it definitely was the start of the problem with Tom. And
The positive thing though with the record was that we had started to venture toward taking steps into this more symphonic progressive area. You know, you have things like Looking Glass on that album.
yeah, but the song that should have been on there is not. The one that, the big Twilight one that we were gonna write.
Yeah, well, the Odyssey ended up being
No, 5, remember?
Oh yeah. The stuff, you had an idea back then for the Odyssey that was supposed to be. That's why if you look at the cover artwork, it's all this whole thing, Twilight and Olympus. So we were gonna do a piece about this. We didn't know what, but some sort of Greek tragedy, you know. And then later on we went back and did it, but
it never was finished because of all these deadlines and all the new drummer and all this stuff. So it was like when I look at the Twilight album, I mean, it's got good. It has Looking Glass on it. It's like one of my favorite songs. And Smoke and Mirrors. I still, to this day, I think they're really good songs. But the album's a little short, and the reason it's short is because there was another track that we were working on. That, you know, we're getting phone calls, oh, you need to be done by such and such a day, we're in the studio, we're writing lyrics, we're doing this, and this guy's mixing. You know, it was just a big mess, so it was like, this song never got done. And so the album to me is like a little, it's good, but it's just incomplete to me. There should have been like the one big 15, 20-minute song that would have been like kind of like what we did for the Odyssey.
well, we lucked out though because we finally, we had insisted, I think, at that point that we played.
That was the last time the deadlines and all that crap.
Yeah, and then that tour actually that we did in Japan was pretty successful for us, and everyone really raved about it.
Jason,
We met you there, you know, and that was the beginnings of getting us here to Europe. And then when we came in finally done Europe in '99, that tour, you know, we had a really good run. I mean, we were playing big places. We had maybe one show or so. The first time we played here in Paris was at La Locomotive, you know, which was probably the biggest show in the whole tour. I mean, every other night was 200 folks, you know, 300 people, not big, but boy, man, they packed in these hot, tiny little rooms, and they just would go crazy, you know. So, and we just played our asses off, you know. So then, you know, a lot of press. Then the press, of course, came and they saw it, and then they were like, wow, you guys can do it. And then we got a lot of, you know, write-ups that year that, you know, we really done well and everything. And so that was like, we used to call that, I used to tell him, you know, we got to get over the hump. You know, if we don't get over the hump.
Yeah, I've heard that expression.
Yeah, if we don't get over the hump, we ain't gonna go forward. So, but luckily it worked out. So for the negative side of the record, it ended up being a really positive thing because it catapulted us to the next thing. So, we did a little.